on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for all fiat currencies drops to zero.
Yeah.
So so there's no question. There's between these two, between the paper money and gold and silver, this isn't a competition.
Silver and gold being used as legal tender. Where does your state stand? Today, we're joined by Jp Cortez from the Sound Money Defense League, and they just put out a new Sound Money Index. He's going to tell us where you can discover where your state stands. JP, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Ron, it is so great to be here. I watch your show. It's honored to be on here. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of all of our viewers, right? And there's you and I here today, but there's that third most important person. We refer to them as basement dwellers, but they are gold and silver enthusiasts. A lot of them live in the United States. And you were telling me before we came online, a big new index that you put out, the Sound Money Index, where people can see where their state ranks. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So we'll start with sound money. The idea here is money that retains its purchasing power over the long term when it's tested over time. Gold and silver are obvious examples of that. On top of that, there's the constitutional element where Article 1, Section 10 says nothing shall be made but gold and silver coin, a tender, and a payment of debts. So along with it being written into the American Framework Code, along with it being woven into the fabric of America, it offers two very important value propositions. Sound money is important because it creates stability over the long term. So societies can grow, people can invest, infrastructure can develop, and the prosperous world that we live in today can continue. The other side of that is that gold and silver act as protection against a big government that otherwise might spend recklessly or fight wars of choice. So gold and silver as sound money have been proven for thousands of years. And while the problem is mostly federally based, right, federal policies and the Federal Reserve, the monetary dysfunction stems from there, but that doesn't mean that there aren't practical steps that states can take to mitigate some of this damage. And that's what the Sound Money Defense League does. We go state to state introducing legislation that makes it easier for people to buy or sell gold and silver. It makes it easier for people to use gold and silver as money. And yeah, and
Well,
so
I want to interject something here. I can't keep my mouth from speaking
yeah,
here. You
please.
brought up some important points, right? Gold and silver have held their value for thousands of years. You also talked about the United States, and I talked with Rob Keentz about this a couple of weeks ago, and he agreed. The greatest years of the United States, and I'm getting all worked up here, JP, occurred when we were on the gold standard and when we had silver in our money. You can't argue that. And I think in his book, he even has a section where he talks about that. And the other thing is, this is in the U.S. Constitution. The founding fathers put it in there because they could foresee what could happen down the road. And then later on, we have all this guys like Andrew Jackson and Thomas Jefferson that are like these central banks and the big, like they're more of a threat to our country than an invading army.
Absolutely. And you have these great quotes from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison talking about how fiat currency is a scam that makes a lottery out of all of private property. It's a way to siphon the wealth from the people so that governments can use it to spend on whatever they deem popular at the time. And so it's a horrible way to do money for the people, not for the authorities, but for the people. It's a bad money. And so with the Sound Money Defense League, with the legislation that we're passing, the whole idea is to remonetize money, or to remonetize gold and silver, to make sound money workable as gold and silver. The primary way to do that, we believe, is to remove all of the friction into and out of gold and silver. Right now, that is taxes. In some states, when you buy precious metals, you're going to get hit with a sales tax. There's still 7 states in the country that charge you sales tax for buying gold and silver. There are also, in the majority of states, you're going to get hit with a capital gains tax when you sell your gold and silver, and then you're going to be taxed again by the feds. So gold and silver are in some states taxed 3 times. So it's not that the gold standard failed. It's not that gold and silver are not good as money. It's that the government has created such disincentives that make it unworkable as money. So we go state to state removing those.
So that's what your organization does, helps to further this legislation. What about, I'm going to ask you again, the Sound Money Index? You put that together for people, and they can go check on their state and see where they stand in terms of their abilities to do what was put forth for them in the United States Constitution, correct?
That's exactly right. So the index is a scorecard that ranks all 50 states. This year, we had 14 different types of criteria to determine which state creates the most pro-sound money environment or which state has the most anti-sound money environment. The criteria are the states are graded on things like the sales tax policies and income tax policies against gold and silver. There's average tax rates. There whether the state reaffirmed gold and silver as money, whether they offer contractual protections to gold contracts denominated in gold and silver, and importantly, whether the state has invested in gold and silver, whether the state fund itself, whether the state treasurer themselves has invested gold and silver in pension funds or reserve funds or trust funds. So these are the criteria by which we grade the states. And the top 5 states, this is the 8th year now that we've done this scorecard. The top 5 states.
I was going to ask you, JP, like, so this viewer who's joining us, what states do he or she, because we've got a lot more women that are getting into the precious metal stacking sector. So let me rephrase that. What state does she or he want to be living in?
If you're looking to buy gold, silver, or platinum, do yourself a favor and check out Pimbex, the online precious metals bullion dealer and sponsor of Ron's Basement. I was a happy customer before they offered to support the channel. You'll find they have the best prices, quality, and service. I think Pimbex is best, and you will too. And be sure to tell them that you're from Ron's Basement.
Top 5 here are going to be Wyoming, South Dakota, Alaska, New Hampshire, and Arkansas. Wow. These are 5 states that have been proactive about the legislation they've passed. And a lot of times they've stacked this legislation. This is legislation that originally we took a little baby step, say in 2018 in Arkansas's case, where we passed a bill to remove sales tax. And then just 2 years later, we're passing bigger, more inclusive bills that reaffirm legal tender or bills that establish in-state depositories. So these legislative projects stack on each other. So those are the top 5. The states you absolutely do not want to be in, those are Vermont, New Jersey, Maine, Minnesota, and California. These have the highest taxes, the worst policies against precious metals, and they aren't even introducing legislation to fix these problems in many cases.
Wow. So, when I think about silver and gold as money, what comes to mind is we've got average people out there, right? People like you, people like me, our viewer who's joining us, who work hard every single day, and they get paid in dollars. And those dollars have a track record of losing value, losing money over time, over any period of time, right? You don't even have to cherry pick a specific period of time. What this legislation is doing is helping facilitate, right, the ability for people throughout the country. And again, this is happening on a more state-by-state basis, to protect their wealth, to protect, like, if I work and remodel someone's bathroom and, provide labor and skill for, 2 months straight and do a good job and get paid, that I can store that value in a way that in the future I can get I can harvest it myself through trading with someone else.
Exactly right. See, historically, people were able to use the money as their savings vehicle. People stored wealth in money when money was gold and silver. But today, because of the inflationary the inflationary system of our dollar, where millions on billions are being printed all the time, people are having to look for other avenues to store their wealth. Many times that means investing in the risky stock market casino. Many times that means consumerism. You want to spend your dollars before they lose their value. And so that it incentivizes spending and it disincentivizes savings. And savings is what families need to be prepared for catastrophe. It's what countries, societies themselves need to be able to prepare for in order to defend against catastrophe or war or whatever it is. So the money is incredibly important. And right now there's briar and there's thorn and thistle all over people being able to use gold and silver as money. So we're just going around removing that.
Yeah, they make it difficult. And I think, that's something I didn't really realize. So I thank you for well, I realized, but maybe hadn't synthesized this idea that they make it difficult. If you come to St. Louis right now and our viewer joins us, we'll take him along or her, or him along with us, and we're going to go out to lunch and I say, hey, let's pay with silver. It's going to be hard for us to find a restaurant that takes silver. Maybe we could find one. We'd have to look long and hard, or we would have to go to my local coin shop, I know you like fancy things, so I'd have to probably sell 4 ounces of silver.
I'm getting the lobster.
You're getting it right. You're getting the lobster. And then we go out, they make it difficult. This legislation and what's going on now, in a lot of ways is working also. I think this is an important thing to make precious metals more functional, to be used in everyday transactions. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. See, the legislation that we're pursuing and working to introduce and ultimately pass across the country, this isn't legislation that creates money, but it does clear the space so that we can see innovation within money. And we're seeing that today. In the case of gold, you have fractional gold unlike we've ever seen before. You have bills with gold inlaid in them. So the innovation happening in money, fractional silver as well, and you're seeing digital gold and silver, the companies that are doing digital vaulting and that sort of thing as well. So you're seeing innovation within money, and there are really smart and talented people devoting time and money to fixing America's broken money and clearing the space and giving them the space to be able to do that without penalty, without taxes, without regulators breathing down their neck. Ultimately, that's what we're doing, and that's important.
Yep. Clear, transparent. When we talk about these digital products that are coming on, clear, transparent, audited, so people can have a digital representation of silver and gold, but know that representation is that there's a reflection of that in terms of real metal in a vault somewhere. Much different when I think about the system that we live under right now here in the United States, where we supposedly have gold. We won't go down that rabbit hole. But
have you seen it? I haven't seen it. Have you?
I think there was a tweet by Steve Mnuchin 12 years ago that he saw the gold. And we believe him.
Yeah.
And then we have the Fed on the other side, right? We don't know what they're doing. I was just watching something like we don't know. They have all types of things going on that we don't even know about. So we're in this system now with paper dollar, electronic dollars. We know it's been printed infinitely almost, and a gold backing. Not a gold backing, but a gold supply that for some reason they won't show us. And what we're talking about, the prospect of having in the future is like real metal and real money for the American people. And it's happening state by state.
Yeah, and I think to your point about America's gold holdings, maybe the gold is there, maybe it isn't. But I think a larger maybe cause for concern is the possibility that, sure, maybe it is there, but who owns it? Has it been rehypothecated? Has it been pledged as collateral for someone else? There are all of these, there are a number of ways that even if the gold is literally still in the vaults, ownership rights and all of these things might be in question. So who's to say? But yeah, so the progress is coming from the states. The states themselves, people in the states are waking up to the idea that, wait, hang on, maybe our money isn't as stable as we thought it was. And I think that's ultimately the question, or the kind of big thesis behind what we're doing. I think if people had to choose a money, they wouldn't choose the dollar. Absent coercion of regulation and absent the taxation and all the disincentives to all of the other options, if people just had choice, they wouldn't choose the dollar. It's easy to be debased. It's used to fund bad things around the world and here in the States. So if given the choice, let's let the market decide. And I'm of the crazy idea that if the market decides, gold and silver will win out.
Yeah. Well, because here's a 1 ounce silver round, right? If when you came to St. Louis to eat that lobster for lunch with me, you installed a new kitchen faucet for me at the same time, and I gave you this 1 ounce of silver, right? You could hold it for the next, and I imagine you're maybe 30 or so years old, that you could hold it for the next 40 years,
right,
and most likely harvest the same value out of that one. If I gave you $30 for having installed that faucet and you stuck it in your pocket and found it 40 years later, you might be lucky to be able to buy a hamburger at McDonald's, is what I would, if even that at that point. And that's based on what happened over the previous 30 years. Things have escalated in this world in terms of monetary and fiscal mismanagement.
Absolutely. And the old adage about how, kings and queens in the past, they were buried with gold and silver. And if you were to dig them up today, you would find gold and silver, and that gold and silver would have value. But if I died today and you stuffed my pockets full of $100 bills, and then 100 years from now dug me up, you're going to find a skeleton and paper. That's all it's going to be.
Right.
And the other saying about, 100 years ago, an ounce of gold could buy you a good suit. And today, that same ounce of gold can buy you the same good suit. The dollar obviously does not have that sort of hold over its purchasing power long term.
Fortuna Silver Mines is a global intermediate gold and silver producer. Since 2005, Fortuna's best-in-class management has delivered impressive growth and profits. Fortuna's solid financial position and operational expertise allows for performance in any precious metals price cycle and provides a foundation from which to harvest great profits in more favorable metals markets. Investing in Fortuna is an investment in quality, long-term, sustainable production of in-demand precious and base metals.
Or if you're cleaning out your great-grandpa's farmhouse and you find an old pair of his overalls, and 60 years ago he'd stuck a silver dollar in his pocket and forgot about it, or in the other pocket stuck a paper dollar, which one has at the time they had the same value, and today much, much more. What about on a national basis? There's this representative, I think in West Virginia, we love him here in the basement, Mr. Mooney, I like to call him. He pops up on my screen from time to time. What I always hear is, don't ever hope that anything's going to happen, because on a federal, the national. But is there any developments that are worth mentioning when it comes to precious metals on a national legislative level?
There certainly are. Like you said, Representative Mooney has been a champion for gold and silver now for several years. Taking the torch from the Ron Pauls of the world and championing sound money. Representative Mooney is our guy. I'm fortunate to say that the Sound Money Defense League has been working closely with Representative Mooney. We've helped introduce a couple of pieces of federal legislation, legislation that would, in some cases, peg the dollar to a fixed amount of gold. In some cases, this is legislation that would remove capital gains from gold on the federal level so that states wouldn't have to individually do it. Legislation that calls for a full accounting of America's gold holdings, right? Like we joked about earlier, no one has seen this gold in decades. Outside of a couple of made for TV Hollywood flashes of a camera towards the gold and then panning away, we really have no idea what's in there. And so this is legislation that would call for a full accounting of the gold, any encumbrances placed on the gold. So there's definitely positive legislation being introduced. On top of that, Representative Mooney recently published a letter that I believe he wrote to the Treasury, asking about the dollar's value and gold holdings. So Representative Mooney has applied great pressure to federal legislators all over. We're excited to see him continue to do that.
So he is our warrior on a national basis, is what I gather. Very, very interesting. What if people want to get involved in this? I know that when we're talking about state legislation, grassroots support is very important. What's been your experience? What are your thoughts in that regard?
The grassroots makes all the difference in the world. It is an invaluable part to the strategy. More than me going to testify before committees or talking to caucuses or meeting with legislators, hearing from people in the state makes way more of a difference than any of that stuff. Because the reality is state capitals are not like DC. You're not going to have an intern pick up your call and your message might not even get to your congressman. That's what happens when you call the DC Capitol phone. But here in the States, if a state legislature, if you light up a switchboard with 10 or 20 phone calls, that draws attention. That sets them on high alert. Wow, we're dealing with something here. And the proof is in the pudding. When we worked with legislators to pass legislation in Alabama and Tennessee and Arkansas, I can remember 3 different instances where on the Senate floor or on the House floor, legislators were saying, wow, this has been the most popular bill of the year, a bill to remove sales tax on gold and silver. We've heard from people more to do that than gun laws or abortion or tax laws or any of these other very contentious issues. So to be an active member of your legislature makes all the difference in the world when it comes to passing these legislative projects.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, the Sound Money Index, that's a project in collaboration with Money Metals Exchange, a national precious metals dealer. So you can find the index. All of that information is on moneymetals.com/Sound Money Index. Our website, soundmoneydefense.org, we're regularly publishing legislative updates. There's also a small little sign up form on the Sound Money Defense League's webpage. We ask you to put in your name or your email and your zip code. That way we can segment our list state to state. That way, when something is happening in Indiana and there's an upcoming vote that is happening tomorrow, we can quickly shoot out a blast with all of the legislators' information, contact information already there so that people can quickly mobilize and call their legislator or email their legislator and tell them, vote yes on this bill. I strongly urge you to vote yes on this bill. So I encourage everyone listening, anyone within the sound of my voice, please understand the power that you have with state capitals. That's not true in DC, but on the state level, you have so much power. So please be an active participant in your legislature.
I want to say, I think that's very smart when you said we have people put their zip code in, and I thought, everybody's going to think, they want my personal information. But the reason why you do that is because then, yes, if there's something going on in Missouri, you can send something out to everyone in the Missouri zip code.
In Missouri, right.
And it only takes 5 or 10 minutes to make a phone call or send a letter.
Right.
Correct.
And exactly. It takes no time at all. We make it very easy. There's literally a button that says click here to email all of the legislators on the committee. You click that. There's a pre-written email already there. Sign your name to it and click send. It takes 2 seconds. But I think importantly, right? So in 2023, we had a true test of the sound money movement that passed with flying colors. In 2023, there were 25 states in the United States that introduced 50 pieces of pro-sound money legislation across the country. So, you don't necessarily want to be, if you're in Oregon, you don't necessarily want to be hearing about Missouri alerts or Idaho alerts or New York alerts. But since there's so many active projects, that's why it's important, that we be able to segment this by state.
Yeah.
Because 2024, I'm certain there will be countless other legislative projects across the country as well as the sound money momentum continues to build.
Yeah. Hey, and let's talk about even some more good news, JP, that as this momentum builds and this legislation continues to be passed, this could create another big demand source for the precious metals as well. I mean, the viewer who's with us here I can almost guarantee own some physical silver, physical gold, and having, I mean, we can't sit here and say, oh, the price of silver will absolutely be $85 once, 25 of the state, whatever, but that this can create an increase in demand. In particular, I know in Missouri, I ran some numbers last year, just with what they were proposing had the legislation passed, the amount of money from like the state general fund that would have been allocated to silver and gold, and it was significant.
Yes, absolutely. Between states themselves being more willing to invest in physical gold and silver, between businesses themselves being willing to stay in the state or to operate in a state because they don't have tax pressures that dissuade them from doing so, and between people in the state no longer leaving the state to buy their metals or no longer having to go online and store in a depository out of state because their state charges sales tax. This is all revenue that the state brings in. This is the idea. I was in New Jersey 2 weeks ago testifying before a bill to end sales tax on gold and silver in the state of New Jersey. I'm happy to say that we passed unanimously out of the House and passed unanimously out of the Senate committee. Hopefully in the next couple of days, we'll have more movement. But testifying next to me was a coin shop owner who was telling the committee, I have the receipts right here. I have $200,000 of people that are leaving the state, that are crossing the state line to go to New York to buy their Eagles or to buy their Krugerrands or to buy whatever they're buying. And they're choosing not to buy from me because my state charges tax. So the state is losing out, businesses are losing out, individual investors are losing out. And so that's why it's so important to remove all of this stuff.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I want to switch gears for a second and get your perspective on the typical silver and gold investor, enthusiast, stacker, however you want to say it. We know there's more women that are coming into the stacking community. I see that with my channel, which is awesome. Cool. You seem to be a few years younger than me, so I wanted to get your perspective. I'm 53 years old, but when I look at you seem to be of a younger generation than me, but extremely knowledgeable when it comes to what's going on in the sector. What's your feel in terms of younger people? I get a feeling that we're seeing, I'm hearing that there's more younger people that are beginning to realize the attributes of sound money. Are you seeing that on your end?
I think that we're seeing a very big divide right now. We're seeing a divide between, the MMT, the modern monetary theory, magical monetary theory, as we jokingly call it.
We call it unicorn fart dust here in the basement, right? Like, woof,
perfect.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's as dirty as I'll get. So, yeah.
And so we're seeing this idea, and this is what the government practices. This is in practice what we're doing. The idea that you can just print endlessly and you can print everyone into prosperity. And the flip side to that is people waking up to this idea saying, hang on, no, I don't need an economic PhD to tell me that if you print more dollars, all of the other dollars will be devalued. This doesn't, and you can hide it behind, very, very complex regressions and graphs and different types of fiscal or monetary alchemy. You can try to hide it, but regular people understand what's happening. They're no longer blind to this. These people, we increased the money supply 40% over the course of 18 months. Massive inflation happened, and people got like a $1,200 check. So understandably, they're upset. They just got bilked. They got taken to the cleaners. So they're starting to question these ideas. Wait, what makes a good money? What if we didn't use the dollar? Are there attributes that one might want in a money? And so I often say, there are more than 8,000 elected state legislators in the United States. The vast majority of them have never even heard the phrase sound money, have never asked themselves the question, what makes a good money? Where does money come from? And part of this is educational. I'm going into state legislatures. Other sound money advocates are going into state legislatures, having these conversations and educating the people that make decisions. And I think we're seeing the growth of that. right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like you said, there's a quote unquote demographic to your average silver stacker or gold stacker. But I'm a prime example of like it's not just quote unquote older people that were around
Boomers.
pre-1971. Yeah, it's not just boomers. And
Right.
additionally, it's not partisan anymore.
Yeah.
We're working to pass bills unanimously in states like New Jersey. These are not states that are known as states that regularly repeal taxes. We've been successful in Pennsylvania and in Hawaii. Like these are states, it's not a red and blue divide. Almost everyone is affected, harmed by inflation. So
Right.
the partisan, the tribalism, and it's no longer on the sound money side, regarding sound money, it's no longer a partisan issue.
Well, and I like to put it this way, like there's a lot of individuals in the United States that hold physical metals, right? We are a slim part of the population, but we've chosen to be our own central banks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's happening on an individual level. It's now happening, thanks to people like you, on a state by state level. Okay. On a national level in the United States, we know that they aren't interested, that it's going to be a big, big, big fight. But then if we even zoom out just a little bit further and look at the world, we know what's going on in the world. And we can also circle back to the fact, not only is it a worldwide thing regarding silver and gold, but it's also a timeless thing. And I like to say, a couple of months ago, it dawned on me that, silver and gold have survived every war. They've survived every calamity that have been thrown at them for the millennium, right? They've also survived every form of economic communism, capitalism, socialism, and as you were saying, they're universal amongst, they've survived every political party that's ever come and gone. So the likelihood of them lasting longer, and then, if you and I look at if we could pile up all the silver and gold in the world, of course we'd have to, try to get that supposed gold from Fort Knox. But if we could pile it all up, and then we could pile up next to it all the paper money, and let's say we were doing this in the year 2020 next to it, right? And then just to visualize how much more paper money has just been created, whereas the pile of gold and silver goes up at, silver, you could almost argue, is going down, but gold maybe is going up. There's a 1% supply increase. It makes it very clear which holds its value over a long period of time.
Absolutely right. And I have said before, the gold standard did not fail. It was killed by dishonest politicians who don't like honest money.
Yeah.
So the paper has obvious benefits to the people in charge, being able to buy votes using, because you're funding expensive programs, or being able to retain power around the world because you're fighting wars of choice. There's a lot of power that comes with being able to control the money. And it's the average people that are harmed, the ones harmed by inflation the most. Yeah. These are wage earners. These are people on fixed incomes. These are, people with savings.
Yeah.
And so it's so incredibly important. I think, like you said, gold and silver have been around for 5,000 years. And on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for all fiat currencies drops to zero. So there's no question. There's between these two, between the paper money and gold and silver, this isn't a competition.
No, it's not. It's really not. And I'm not a historian, but if you look back to 1933, I think it was, the gold confiscation by Roosevelt, he confiscated the gold because he wanted to print money, right? And he couldn't, because they were tethered to the gold standard. So he went to this extreme measure of criminalizing holding gold, right? You could get a $10,000 fine or get put in jail. Got all the gold that he could, right? And then immediately repriced it, which was basically printing money, okay? And then if you fast forward to, was it 71, when Nixon temporarily, JP, he said explicitly, it was temporarily taking us off the gold standard.
there's nothing quite as permanent as a temporary government program.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and from what I understand, he was doing that because they were tethered to gold and he needed to print money to pay for the Vietnam War. And a lot of people argue also to help stimulate the economy so that he could get reelected. So
Right.
I think when we look at history, it's pretty clear, excuse me, what's going on out there. Hey, this has been great. I got one final question for you, JP. Either you have two options. Either we're going to sing Jingle Bells together, or option number two, since my viewers, this is my first time for my viewers to get to meet you. Option number two would be your mom is out to lunch with a couple of her friends she hasn't seen for 2 years, and she's going to brag about JP, her loving, her favorite son. What are a couple things she's going to say about you?
I almost want to choose Jingle Bells.
Oh, come on. What's she going to say about JP?
I think what my mom would say is that JP is foundationally, principally sound. All of this, like you mentioned, I'm not in the typical demographic of someone who supports gold and silver as money. But I spent a lot of time through college. I went to Auburn University to get my degree, and while I was there, I studied at the Mises Institute. So I was inundated in the economics of it, the importance of sound money, the way an economy shifts during wartime, and how productive endeavors get shifted to building bombs and tanks, and how that ultimately doesn't really create value. It's production and entrepreneurship that moves societies forward. It increases the life expectancy rate and increases everyone out of poverty. So that became a crusade. That belief that, if you fix the money, you fix the world, and that might be a little, self-important, or that might be giving too much credence to my job because I'm a little biased and I'm in this space. But I sincerely believe that, if we were to take an Austrian approach or a free market approach to money, we would see the life conditions of millions, billions around the world increase. And so it's not about creating money. It's not about the being able to talk to you and come on really great podcasts. Ultimately, there's something foundational here that's happening that my grandkids, their grandkids, won't be able to enjoy this incredibly prosperous society we've built if we keep doing the same thing monetarily that we've been doing for at least 100 years. So it's a philosophical fight for me, and I think that's what my mom would say.
What I hear you saying is quality of life, improvements in quality of life, not just for people in the United States, but even throughout the world, right? That
all over the world,
less war, more peace, and
more trade,
more productivity, trade.
Like you were saying, that period, the most productive years of American history, the Industrial Revolution, the late 1800s coming up to 1913, where the Federal Reserve was established. You're talking about a period of time with virtually no inflation, where life standards skyrocketed because of commercialization and industrialization, trade between nations. That is the literal recipe for a prosperous society. And if we're not careful, we're going to ruin the whole thing.
Yep. I was listening to a speaker last night. Her name was Kathleen Tyson, I believe, and she actually worked for the New York Fed at the beginning. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, she does. She does work in multi-currency stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was showing Campbell soup, cost of Campbell soup, and it remained constant pretty much until 1971, and then it skyrocketed. And I think that the other thing I thought of as you were talking, and you've been very generous with your time this morning, so thank you.
No, thank you. It's been great chatting.
Is that as we look on a worldwide basis, the world is moving back to gold. We know the central banks are buying more and more and more gold, and I've heard different. There's only one reason why, right? These are the most sophisticated financial institutions in the world, and it's almost like how do I say this? I have this crazy notion that most people don't agree with. I think that we've never really gone off the gold standard. I think Nixon took us off the gold standard, but it's like smoke and mirrors. But gold has always been there, right? And that gold is reemerging again, and silver, as the preferred medium of exchange throughout the world. And I was talking with this guy Vince Lanci the other day, and Vince said, it's important to remember that like countries aren't trusting the U.S. dollar now, so they're selling treasuries and then they're buying gold, but they trust each other even less. So everybody goes to gold, right? Like we can trade with that; it's real. We can trust it. And it's going to be an interesting ride. JP, did I miss anything? Oh, hold on. I can't hear you.
Apologies. No, I don't think we've missed anything. It's been great. Great chatting. Again, I would encourage everyone to check out the soundmoneydefense.org to sign up for our mailing list. Check out moneymetals.com to find the Sound Money Index to see where your state ranks. And I'm available. I'm on Twitter, Jp Cortez 27. My email is readily available if anyone wants to contact me. If anyone wants to be an active participant in a state where maybe there isn't a project actively happening and you want to be the one that goes into that capital and finds a sponsor and creates this legislative project, I'm happy to provide model legislation and support in any way that we can. So thank you, Ron, for having me on. Thank you, Basement Dwellers, for letting me take up so much of your time. It's been great hanging out with y'all.
It's been JP, Ron, and our viewer, who's always the most important. And I think they've benefited a lot by listening to this. I will put links to both of the organization sites that you mentioned earlier. And just so everyone knows, that question I asked JP about what his mom would say about him, he did not know that was coming. And I thought that was about as great of an answer as I've ever heard. So can we count on seeing you again some point in the future here in the basement?
I certainly hope so. If I'm invited back, I'd be happy to make the trip anytime.
You'll be back. Have a great day. Thanks, JP.
Thanks, Ron. Have a good one.